You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin.
Howdy, folks, and welcome to another rootin' tootin' episode of The Hero's Journey, where we discuss your favorite stories through the lens of Joseph Campbell's classic I guess as much as I can handle. Classic.
I was hoping
myth.
you would do something like that. That was great. Well done.
Classic monomyth from his opus, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and Chrisopher Vogler's modern adaptation from his book, The Writer's Journey.
Slipping in a little Doc Holliday there.
Perhaps.
I feel like he would have read The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
You think? Oh, he would have. Yeah. That's
Doc Holliday was an educated man.
In Latin, nonetheless.
In this episode, we are heading back to the Wild West, a genre we've not touched since our 310 to Yuma episode way back in 2019 before the world turned upside down. And while my favored selection did not win the poll, I am still happy to be doing this episode. Westerns are one of my favorite genres because they remind me of growing up as a kid in Texas, watching Westerns with my dad while we snacked on peanut butter crackers and chocolate milk.
Well, I guess we know what your beverage is going to be. Spoiler! We chose 3 Westerns produced during the late 1900s. You can't, oh my God, you can't call them the late 1900s. That's not okay.
You can. You absolutely can.
And our Patreon supporters of the Mentor tier and higher voted on which of the 3 they wanted us to watch and analyze. The ballots have been tallied by us, and here are the results.
Jeff, breaking my heart for a second time. Third place went to Silverado with just 5% of the vote. 5%. Really?
Wow.
Everybody? Silverado is an excellent Western.
Wow.
I don't understand why it keeps coming in deep third place on these polls. What's the point of life? I can't anymore. Dan, I shouldn't be expected to.
Dan, look, it's okay. We're gonna get through this. Next Western will be A, Silverado, B, Silverado, C. By the way, we joke all the time to the patrons listening that there's movies we want to do that we just want to cram them down your throat and make you pick. So sometimes we'll be like, wait, let's pick this movie we want to do, and then like 2 horrible, miserable movies. And we did that once, and you picked the damn miserable movie, so we give up. We give up trying to manipulate you.
Second place, with 35% of the vote, was Christopher Cane's 1988 Brat Pack Western Young Guns, starring the brothers Estevez. And the winner, with 60% of the vote, is another 90s movie. We can't get away from them. Tombstone.
Tombstone was released on Christmas Day in 1993 and was something of a box office disappointment. It earned just $56 million against his $25 million production budget. The film was written by Kevin Jarre and briefly directed by him as well until he was replaced after he fell behind schedule. George P. Cosmatos took over directing duties with just 2 days to prep, and according to Val Kilmer, was heavily assisted by Kurt Russell, who served as something of a shadow director.
Yeah, Kilmer wrote that Kurt Russell really is the director of this film.
Wow.
Cosmatos has the credit, but Kurt Russell did so much of the directing duties that he's basically the director of the movie.
Wow.
That's Kilmer's impression.
Was he also the makeup artist? Because I have some notes.
No. For those of you curious how that other Wyatt Earp movie that came out a few months later did, Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp had more than double the budget of Tombstone, but earned less than half the box office that Tombstone earned.
Ouch.
That is an ouch. Mid-90s were rough for Kevin Costner with Wyatt Earp, Waterworld, Postman. Anyway, we're not talking about Kevin Costner. We're talking about
Tombstone is what we're talking about. Tombstone is performed by a posse of great actors, including Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Michael Biehn, Dana Delaney, Powers Booth, Jason Priestley, Billy Zane, John Corbett, Michael Rooker, Thomas Hayden Church, Stephen Lang, Paul Ben Victor, and on and on and on and on and on. But I'll stop there because we want to keep this episode under 2 hours.
What was that last name you said?
Paul Ben Victor, the famous Paul Ben. Oh, we'll talk about him later. Sorry, didn't mean to slip that in.
Okay, looking forward to an on-air tidbit, I guess. All right. Sadly, Jeffrey, the film was completely snubbed by all award shows, despite the fact that Val Kilmer turned in an Oscar-worthy performance.
Yeah, he did.
But if you look at the list of nominees for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role that year, you kind of understand how tough choices had to be made. Pete Postlethwaite in The Name of the Father, John Malkovich in the Line of Fire, Ralph Fiennes in Schindler's List, Leonardo DiCaprio in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, a role Jeffy Pants auditioned for, and Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, a role Jeffy Pants auditioned for. That one's not true. That one's not true. He did audition for Gilbert Grape, though.
I did. I feel bad for Val, but that's a heavy category there. He's lucky they didn't pick me for Gilbert Grape. That's all I have to say. I could have been a contender.
Instead of a bum, which is what you are. All right, Jeff, saddle up and ride out. But remember, law don't go around here, law dog. This is the hero's journey of Tombstone. Law don't go around here, law dog. Savvy? I love Stephen Lang in this movie.
He's so good.
Unrecognizable. Like, I didn't even recognize him.
He is so filthy. The whole movie, he is just covered in filth. The whole time. Act 1 of the hero's journey, which begins with the ordinary world, where we see our main character in their status quo normal life. I am deeply disturbed and concerned about my analysis of this film.
Okay.
It changed more times than any movie we've analyzed so far. It changed. And
yes,
I swung back and then I swung forward again, and I'm arguing with myself about two distinct periods. And the thing is, like, the running time conversation, listeners, we often have conversations about traditional structure of a Hollywood movie is 90 minutes, Act 1's 30, Act 2's 60, Act 3's 30, and there's certain little...
Your math doesn't work out there. That's
30, 60, 30.
That's 120 minutes.
You're right, that's 2 hours. In any case, there's little milestones of page number in the script.
He's a writer, folks, not a mathematician.
And running times. Math don't go around here. Anyway, so when we're analyzing particularly Hollywood movies, we keep that in mind when we're trying to find they can be clues. The running time can be clues of where the sections line up, and I struggled mightily. So Act 1, this film delivers its world of common day via lots of voiceover. Lots of, I mean, if you're not going to get Morgan Freeman, you should probably not have this much voiceover. And the screenplay is
you didn't like Robert Mitchum?
He's no Morgan Freeman.
Wow.
The screenplay there's like 8 to 10 pages of voiceover. So it's the screenplay's even longer. I don't know how this got past, like so many screenplays that 3 pages of VO, see ya. Anyway, it's 1879 in the Old West. The Civil War is over. Cattle towns are cropping up all over the West. And with them, lawlessness, mayhem, and murder. Silver has been found in Arizona, giving birth to mining towns, including Tombstone, Arizona. Wyatt Earp, legendary lawman, now retired and seeking a peaceful life for his family, including his brothers Virgil and Morgan and their wives, they decide to settle in that very town of Tombstone. Also, Wyatt's BFF Doc Holliday, a southern gentleman turned gambler and gunslinger, also moves west, hoping the dry climate will alleviate the symptoms of his tuberculosis, because he is a lunger. But Dan, it's not just silver and cow patties on the rise in Arizona. A group of over 100 exiled Texas outlaws, calling themselves the Cowboys, have established themselves as the first organized crime group in America. And they're a rootin' and a shootin' and a terrorizing weddings. In addition to the VO, there are actually a couple of scenes that introduce the characters that I think are worth talking about.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Did you feel that this little silent film portion with narration was necessary?
I didn't. It felt to me like they were trying way too hard to make us believe this was real. Like they were trying to make us feel like, hey, we really have to get you into the real world of what it was like in a town. And I'm like, no, we've seen Westerns. This is a crazy almost fantasy level. It's not a nitty gritty. I didn't think it was necessary at all. I agree with your assessment.
Because all of the story points that are brought up during this piece are brought up again in the film. You could have just cut that.
I found a PDF scan of the screenplay, and I'm not kidding you. It's like 5 to 8 pages of VO.
Wow.
We meet some of these Texas outlaw cowboys at one of the wedding terrorizings, led by a good-humored sociopath, Curly Bill, and his violent Bible-quoting lieutenant, Johnny Ringo. Curly Bill and his men shoot the bride and the groom, who apparently is part of the Mexican police and responsible for the death of some of their red sash-wearing comrades. But it's Ringo who caps the Padre. But before he does, the Padre delivers some foreshadowing en Espanol in the form of a verse from Revelation, not Revelations, Revelation.
Hey, Johnny, what that Mexican mean a sick horse is gonna give us, huh?
He's quoting the Bible. Revelations. Behold, a pale horse. The man who sat on him was death. And hell followed with him.
And we get this great push-in on Michael Biehn's blank, vacant stare, opened mouth, classic shot in the history of 90s cinema, and one that sticks in my head. What an interesting choice. So then we meet Wyatt Earp in the flesh, wearing a majestic mustache and a generous coat of eyeliner as he steps off the train and surveys his new home state. And we get a little introduction to his character. There's a handler kind of beating a horse, and he stops the handler and takes the rope, and he beats the handler with the rope. It hurts, don't it? And we get a sense he's not only a good man, he's a just man, and maybe even one who believes in an eye for an eye. We meet up with his brothers, Virgil and Morgan, and their wives, and we learn that Wyatt was Mom's favorite, that his wife, Maddie, has an opium problem, and that thanks to Wyatt, the brothers are here to strike it rich in Tombstone. We have this nice little tableau where they're standing in front of a window, admiring themselves, admiring their family all together. And then the final section, I would say, is we get to meet Doc.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly hammered and has clearly been gambling for a very long time. He looks very pale and unhealthy.
Sweaty.
At least down to the chin line. Below that, he looks healthier. So far, the makeup artistry in this movie is not living up to the eyeliner. Anyway.
I didn't notice it.
In that first shot of Kurt Russell when he steps off the train, the eyeliner is unbelievable. And then anytime you see Doc outdoors standing up, there's like a distinct color change below the chin. He goes from pale to, slightly sunburned white guy in the desert. Anyway, we meet Doc, who responds to an accusation of cheating at cards by stabbing his accuser. And then with his partner and lover, Kate, they clean out the saloon and blow town. That's our World of Common Day in Tombstone, Arizona. Over to you, Dan.
Did you know who played Ed Bailey, the guy who was playing cards with?
Who?
Frank Stallone.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mentioned him later in the thing, but I didn't remember that was him at the beginning.
And if I didn't think that we could be friends, I don't think I could bear it.
So good.
The next segment is the call to adventure. The hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. Man, Jeff, I fought with what the call to adventure was.
You mean which of the 9 calls to adventure you should mention?
Wyatt has a self-imposed call to adventure, which he states later once to Josephine Marcus and once to Doc Holliday, which is to have a normal life. He served as a lawman in Kansas, and now he wants to settle down with his family and start a business with his brothers and make their fortune. That is his self-imposed call to adventure. That's why they're in Tombstone. When he and his family are on the train platform, he says,
I sure been dreaming about this, God, since forever.
And then this is when he has them stand before that window in this ideal and idyllic representation of that dream. And Virgil at this point says, "Thank you, Wyatt. This is all you're doing." And Wyatt responds, "We'll make our fortune, boys." This is Wyatt presenting the call to adventure to himself and his family. Other call to adventure, the one that really prevents Wyatt from living in the comfort of his ordinary world, which is Wyatt Earp is approached by multiple law enforcement officials. Once in Tucson, U.S. Marshal Crawley Dake, played by Gary Clark, approaches him. In Tombstone, Mayor Clum and later Sheriff Behan want him to put on the badge and help combat the cowboys.
Yeah.
And he refuses every time.
He didn't even let them finish their invitation. They're halfway through the call, and he's like, "Nope, I don't do that anymore."
Yeah,
like,
he just shuts them down immediately. He knows exactly what they're going to ask, and he's not interested.
Yeah.
Those are the calls to adventure as I saw them.
I see Wyatt as essentially a classic reluctant hero. He has refused the call before the movie started. He's retiring. He's giving up the law. He's running away from responsibility, essentially. He's like I'm not a lawman anymore. That's not who I am. I'm just going to run away and be rich and have fun. And like you said, the world is trying to call him out for who he really is, which is you're a lawman. You have to be part of justice. And it's in his blood. It's in his blood, and it's in the way he behaves until it gets official, and then he backs off. The only other call that I saw that you didn't mention was the romantic call to adventure from Josephine.
Yeah, I've got points about it, but I struggled with whether or not that was really a...
Yeah, I struggled with it too, but I think it's significant because he does end up... She tempts him away into a life of adventure. He is trying to make himself a quiet, retreative life, and the world won't let him because that's not who he really is.
Right.
So she's, I think, drawing him out. She spots him. She gets out of the carriage in Tombstone. She spots him, and she tells Billy Zane, "I want one." And then at the theater, when she finishes performance, she looks up and makes eye contact with him, and he says out loud, "Well, I'll be damned." And his wife's sitting right there. And
yeah, and she notices this.
Yes,
she sees all this happen, and she is visibly upset.
She is, and rightfully so. And Dana Wheeler Nicholson is so great at being this put-out wife. So, and then there's a couple other moments with Josephine that I think are a call to a romantic adventure. That's the only thing I had that you didn't mention.
Fair.
That brings us to refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, our hero refuses the call. Sometimes this energy is expressed from within, and sometimes from without. Wyatt refused the call before the camera started rolling. Textbook reluctant hero. No, not going to let you finish the invite. I'm out. At the train station, as you mentioned.
Mr. Earp, my name's Dake, Crawley Dake, U.S. Marshal for this territory.
Forget it. I'm retired.
Excuse me?
I said forget it. I don't want the job, and that's final.
I don't think you understand.
No, you don't understand, Marshal. I did my duty. Now I'd like to get on with my life. I'm going to Tombstone.
And this is a nice little moment of character development because Dake says, "I never heard a rich man didn't have a guilty conscience." And Wyatt says, "I already got the guilty conscience. I might as well have the money too." That's Wyatt in a nutshell, I think. He's given up on trying to be at peace with his inner life. So he's trying to make his outer life peaceful. All the choices he makes are about outward success and rejecting excitement, adventure, violence. Gambling is about as owning a bar is about as adventuresome as he wants to be. And I think it has a lot to do with that guilty conscience. He does not want to pick up a gun and harm another. He is haunted by having taken someone's life. And I think that's the driver of his refusal of the call. And then there's a great romantic refusal of the call. So after the theater, Wyatt goes to work at the Oriental, which we'll establish later, but he's at work, and in walks Josephine, the actress. Doc spots her before Wyatt does and says, "Wyatt, what would you do if she were to walk in right now?" And he says, "I'd probably ignore her." And then she walks right up to him, and he looks at her, and he turns his back on her, just shuts her out. And Doc says,
"I stand corrected, Wyatt. You're an oak."
That's his refusal of the romantic call to adventure.
Next segment is Meeting with the Mentor, where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. As the Earps arrive in Tombstone, to my second favorite Bruce Broughton score.
What's your first favorite?
He's the composer of the score to Silverado. We could talk about that more if we were actually doing Silverado, but nobody votes for
is that
it.
Is that a Spanish language
whatever.
film? I haven't seen that.
Whatever, it's fine. Cochise County Sheriff John Behan, played by John Tenney, greets Wyatt and offers 3 lovely cottages coming up for rent.
Mm-hmm.
He also says that he's the tax collector and the chair of the nonpartisan anti-Chinese league. Well, okay, so we know what kind of guy you are. And really, Wyatt is not interested in talking to this guy until he says, I'm also on the lot board. I can't remember what the term was,
that's right.
But he's in charge of selling properties. And he's got 3 cottages up front. Throw in a cleaning, no charge.
Yeah.
Suddenly Wyatt's interested. So they agree to see these. So this is kind of an introduction to what Wyatt can expect in Tombstone.
Yeah.
Then he meets Town Marshal Fred White, played by Harry Carey Jr., who tells Wyatt that Behan, he ain't no law. Only real law around here is the cowboys. And here's our introduction, our within the narrative introduction, not the little black and white silent film version that we saw during the completely unnecessary prologue. The cowboys they're it. Nobody does anything without their say-so, and you can always recognize them by the red sashes they wear.
Yeah.
Marshal White also tells the Earp brothers that saloons are the real motherlode in Tombstone. They're all up and down Allen Street, 24 hours a day. You've got drinking, gambling, hostesses, all except the Oriental. A regular slaughterhouse, he says. Even the high rollers won't go near it. And it's a shame, too, because it's a nice place. This puts the bee in Wyatt Earp's bonnet about how they're going to get started here in Tombstone.
Yeah.
So I think the introductions there to town business by the 2 lawmen of the town, those are meetings with the mentor for me. I think in a lot of ways, Wyatt himself tries to be a mentor to his brothers throughout the film.
I'll buy that. And likewise, I think Virgil tries to be a mentor to Wyatt.
As the older brother, yeah.
So that brings us to Crossing of the Threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world. The crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. I struggled mightily with this. Wyatt's adventure, to me, is becoming the lawman he's supposed to be. He doesn't do that until 50 minutes into the film when he finally confronts Curly Bill. So I argued with myself about this for days.
Yes, I did too.
He's a reluctant hero, and so even though that to me is way closer to like Approach, because it's the incident that leads us inexorably into what I consider the ordeal, I'm putting that here because he refuses the call, will not get involved time and again until that moment is when he interferes in justice for the first time. So to me, that's when he steps across the threshold into his commitment to taking on the adventure, which is his willingness to fight justice in this town. That said, I'm going to peel back and do what I think the more conventional movie kind of crossings of the threshold. The clearest one, other than that to me, is, do you know what I'm saying about the encounter with Curly Bill?
Yes, I do. I did the same thing. My act 1 was like 90 minutes long at one point.
Yeah.
Like he just refuses and refuses and refuses and refuses until finally.
Yeah.
Originally was when I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, it's right before the OK Corral, and he tells Virgil, I guess you better swear me in.
Yes.
I worked myself up into thinking that the adventure that Wyatt wants to go on is building a normal life in Tombstone, and the cowboys and all of their shenanigans are constant threshold guardians. The short answer is yes, I understand what you're saying, because I was there as well.
To me, other than the finally confronting Curly Bill, the romantic threshold crossing, Wyatt encounters Josephine while he's riding on her horse. But he rides down to meet her, and they're small talking, and Wyatt's horse is getting antsy because, as Wyatt says, Josephine's mare is in season.
Thinly veiled.
Yeah, thinly veiled
metaphors.
He's being normal, good old Wyatt, but she's flirting, and he's like, well, I guess we better separate him. And she says, I have a better idea. Let's run it out of him. She takes off on her horse, and he says, yeah, I'm an oak, all right, and takes off after her. That's him saying yes to pursuing something with Josephine, because he could, again, just ignore her, turn away, ride off, but he chooses to pursue her. Then there's this thing that could be a test, but I think it's crossing the threshold. Marshal Wyatt is telling him, saloons are the big business, except the Oriental. It's, no one goes there anymore. So Wyatt, being Wyatt, immediately goes in, and his brothers are like, oh boy, here goes Wyatt. He always has to get into trouble. So he walks in, and he walks up to the barkeep, the proprietor, and the proprietor explains that there's this guy over there on the faro table, and he's a jerk, and he bullies everyone, and he's run all the good customers out. And it's Billy Bob Thornton in a great performance.
Yes.
And Wyatt confronts him with a series of really great lines, including, skin that smoke wagon. You gonna do something or just stand there and bleed? So he tosses Billy Bob Thornton out on his ear, and now he's earned himself an interest, a 25% interest in gambling at the Oriental. So now he's a businessman. He's crossing the threshold into the business world of Tombstone. He's got an interest. And then they meet up with Doc. Yay. They're discussing faro versus poker. And there's a line during this scene. Doc says, that's what I like about Wyatt. He can talk himself into anything. And I thought that was a pretty accurate depiction of Wyatt. And then I don't know whether to put this in tests. I think it also is kind of this is the one I thought I would be a mentor moment, because it's establishing some of how to operate in the world, which is Texas Jack Vermillion and Turkey Creek Jack Johnson come out of a saloon, and Creek shoots a guy, and the marshal watches this happen. And why are you smiling?
It's just, it was a very passive presentation that they come out of a saloon.
Yeah, so there's a
gunfight in the saloon, and the victim stumbles out into the street, and Turkey Creek shoots him.
Yes.
You made it sound like they wandered out of the saloon and the dude just gunned a guy down in the street. It's
fair enough. I was trying to de-emphasize the action, because the important part is the way Wyatt, in the presence of the marshal, how this goes down, which is the marshal says, hey, what's going on? And Creek says, he called me a liar, so I shot him. It's a fair fight. So that's mentorship for us. Like, oh, that's how it works. If someone calls you a liar, you can shoot him, and all you have to do is surrender your guns. And so Jack Vermillion and Creek hand over their guns. They submit to the authority of the marshal. We also learn that Wyatt knows Creek from before, and so does Doc. And so we see their affiliations are on the opposite side, but they know each other and they're friendly, and we're seeing the way law works in Tombstone when it works. It doesn't really work most of the time, but in this case it works. So I wish I could say I had some dramatic, clear visual representation of how we get clearly out of Act 1 into Act 2, but I don't. And I think the elements are a little shuffled. Mm-hmm. And those are the key points I had for crossing.
That was a lot. Okay. My crossing the threshold was Wyatt going into the Oriental, throwing out Johnny Tyler, and earning himself a job and a 25% cut of the house take of the faro game at the Oriental. That's Wyatt going into Tombstone, starting business.
I'll buy that.
Crossing the threshold.
See, you've brought this up before, where because of the structure of the movie, you're kind of taking the elements based on what the character thinks he wants, right? Like you said, Wyatt thinks his adventure is settling into business in Tombstone. And so this, in that context, this is a perfect crossing of the threshold, because he literally crosses the threshold into the bar,
right,
and lays stakes in it. So I agree with you. Where I struggle is that that's all still part of his comfortable world. This is what he's imagined for himself.
I disagree. His ordinary world was as a lawman, and he has retired from that. And what is unfamiliar to him is trying to establish a normal life with his family. That is what is unfamiliar to Wyatt Earp. Because you've said that's not who he is. He is a lawman and a gunslinger, and he's resisting that life.
I see it differently. I see his life as a lawman as his backstory. Because from the moment we meet him, his ordinary world is settling in a new place. He wasn't called to settle in the new place in the beginning of the story, and we see him packing up things from his old life. We start with his arrival in Tombstone. So, like I said, in the context of him coming to settle, if the adventure was him becoming a businessman in Tombstone, I agree that's the crossing. That's not the adventure. The adventure is him being drawn into the world of justice in Tombstone. That's why I struggled with this analysis, and that's why Curly Bill I still lean on that as the crossing of the threshold for Wyatt. The other thing I wanted to put in there was there's something in Vogler when he's talking about the Wizard of Oz. And he talks about how sometimes the allies represent different psychological functions of the hero. And when I watched this movie for the second or third time, what I got was that if you add up Virgil, Morgan, and Wyatt, you have a whole healthy man. Because you've got Virgil, right, who is the family man. He's devoted to his wife, and his opinions about justice are pretty black and white.
Damn right, I'll risk it. They're breaking the law.
You've got Morgan, who's the spiritual one.
You look up and you think God made all of that. You still remembered to make a little speck like me.
So as I started to watch this, that's when I started to go, okay, so if you look at the brothers as one character, you start to see that some of the functions of the story, some of the functions of the hero's journey, one brother or the other is ready for them, and the others get dragged along. Anyway, sorry to go off on that tangent, but I kept thinking about Vogler and Toto while I was watching this movie.
Since we're referencing Vogler, he also talks about in The Writer's Journey that many films will have two special worlds. And that's what I see in this film. I see the life Wyatt is trying to build in Tombstone as the adventure, and then the life that he gets dragged into of putting on the badge again as the second special world that interrupts the first one. And he's ultimately forced into it in order to protect his first adventure.
I can see that.
That was where my head was.
I really receive what you're saying about the special world, though. Because if you remove Wyatt Earp as a real historical figure for a moment, because you could have been totally unfaithful about the Wyatt Earp story. You could have made some other Western about a hero lawman. We didn't start in Kansas where he retires and lives in that town and then gets sucked back in. You're right. He is moving to a new place, and that moving to a new place is part of him trying to shed that old identity. So you're right. He thinks his adventure is settling in Tombstone. And of course, he doesn't end up staying in Tombstone. Tombstone is a very short, horrible, dark period of his life before he moves on to the next phase. But that's for later in the episode. Well, let's head over to my kitchen, completely skip the coffee part, and just start drinking.
Oh, gosh.
Or not. Or let's go to the Campbell Cafe for some side quests.
Well, Dan, welcome to the dusty Campbell Cafe. I'm enjoying some cowboy coffee, which I made from yesterday's grounds using some sand and a piece of cheesecloth as a filter, and it's delicious.
Dan, what side quests did you pursue? What side quests did you pursue since last we spoke upon this microphone?
Well, I think first I want to thank our listener Quiva for correcting our pronunciation of Donald Gleason. That's the first order of business here.
I have a screenshot of her message saved in my notes.
Not Domhnall, as we called him throughout for 2 hours of Ex Machina.
Donald.
Sorry,
Donald. And sorry, Quiva. We failed you.
Yeah. I read a book, listened to a book on Audible called Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. It was read by John Banks. This is the first book of a 4-book series in which the hero, Thomas Senlin, travels with his wife, his new bride, to the Tower of Babel. This is a fictional Tower of Babel. This is a kind of a steampunk kind of fantasy world.
Okay.
They take a train to the Tower of Babel. The reason being, Thomas Senlin is a scholar, and he has been studying the Tower of Babel, and it appears to be this mysterious, mythological tourist destination. Nobody knows how tall it is because nobody can see the top because clouds cover the top of the tower. Nobody knows how old it is. Nobody knows where it came from, and there's just all kinds of mystery surrounding this thing. There's a guidebook to the tower that Thomas has read and studied, and it just fascinates him. And so he wants to go to this place. So for their honeymoon, they travel to the Tower of Babel. And he discovers that it is not at all like the guidebook has led him to believe. There are dangers and threats all over. There's a market outside on the ground floor. At this point, Thomas loses track of his wife.
Oh.
Before they separate, she says, hey, if we ever get separated, I'll meet you at the top of the tower. Just kind of like as a kind of a jokey statement.
Interesting plan.
But they do get separated. So the story is Thomas trying to find his wife. And he enters the tower and discovers that every floor basically has its own culture and government and law or lack thereof. It is a procedural adventure of him trying to get from one floor to the next, and his experiences, which are strange and whimsical and sometimes funny. He meets allies and makes enemies and must pass a series of tests to prove his worthiness. I really enjoyed it. The narrator, John Banks, was fantastic. I loved his delivery. It was really a fun book. I think you would enjoy it.
My reaction to it as a writer is, oh my God, that's so much world building. I'm so tired.
What'd you get up to?
As you know, Dan, my dad and I are both huge fans of the James Bond franchise.
Yes.
A documentary called The Sound of 007 came out last year and was released on Amazon Prime Video. My dad and I both texted each other almost simultaneously to say, have you seen that thing? So we've been planning to watch it together. And on Friday, we got the opportunity. We sat down and watched this whole documentary in my living room with the volume cranked.
Nice.
It is about the music. It's not about the sound editing. It's about the music of James Bond, the score and the songs. And so it's interviews with John Barry, all the film composers, most of the musicians who wrote or recorded the songs, and it goes from the style of the song to how that song was used in the score of that film to the lyrics and how they were written to if those motifs were ever called back to from later movies. If you could hope something for how a documentary was to be produced, this is absolutely it. It was more than I would have hoped for. It's beautiful. It's got great interviews. The structure is creative. It's not like linear, like, hey, let's start with Dr. No and end with No Time to Die. It's just incredible the way it's produced. If you're a James Bond fan, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's like 90 minutes long. It was directed by Matt Whitecross, who mostly looks like he's done music videos and then directing live like concert DVDs and stuff. So he's a music guy, and it's a beautiful, wonderful movie. I recommend it.
I think I would really enjoy that. I studied film music in college, and I really enjoyed that class. It was one of my favorites.
Dan, you would in particular enjoy it for sure. It's movie music geek time.
Yeah, because I have now finally watched all of the James Bond films. Every single one.
We need a whole separate episode on that.
It was such a fun experience. Really enjoyed them.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I got you on that train. I've just begun my second cup of coffee. My heart is racing. It's time to saddle up and ride into Act 2.
Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with the road of trials, or tests, allies, and enemies. Having crossed the first threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. Allies for Wyatt Earp are his two brothers, Virgil and Morgan, his bestie, Doc Holliday, Town Marshal Fred White, Milt Joyce, the owner of the Oriental, who gives Wyatt his job and his first income in Tombstone. Major enemies, well, I guess I would say like Josephine Marcus. Not his enemies, sorry, I'm rolling back. Josephine
Temptress.
Marcus, although, yeah, she is a temptress first. She wrecks his marriage. But
as we learn from the marriage, I think.
I get it. But, she would have been considered a homewrecker.
Mm-hmm.
Enemies are the Cowboys, led by Curly Bill Brocious, Johnny Ringo, Ike and Billy Clanton. Shapeshifters, I see Sheriff Behan, who is an ally at the beginning and then becomes very much an adversary. Sherman McMasters, played by Michael Rooker. He starts the film as a cowboy, but you see him being uncomfortable with some of the actions that the cowboys are taking. At the beginning of the film, when the cowboys attack the wedding of that Mexican police officer, murder the entire wedding party, and then drag the bride into the church, and my first thought was, oh God, they're going to rape her. But then you hear a gunshot and then those guys walk out immediately. So I don't know why they dragged her into the church to shoot her when they gunned down everybody else in the street. I think we were meant to believe that was going to happen.
Or maybe
anyhow, McMasters, sorry, what?
Oh, I was going to say, maybe in the editing room, they decided it was too much to have them rape her. So they cut it in a way that they just cap her right away and leave. I don't know.
Maybe. Cap. You love that word.
If Butch goes to Indochina, I want someone waiting in a bowl of rice, ready to pop out and pop a cap in his ass. That line will forever indelibly be written on my mind, and that's where I use the word cap from.
Okay. So while this is happening, McMasters, we see a shot of McMasters close up, and he looks uncomfortable with this situation, the way the bride is being treated.
Good point.
This comes back later in the film. Any other major character? I mean, there's hundreds of people in this movie. We can't list them all.
Yeah.
Those are the major ones that I picked out.
Well, you did leave out like the most important enemy of all. One of the cowboys named Florentino, played by Paul Ben Victor. I can't believe that you...
Is that a friend of yours?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked. Okay. Sorry. Failed at this subtle setup. Paul Ben Victor is one of those guys where you look up on IMDb and he's been in everything for all time since the beginning of history of cinema. He's just an actor that's in everything. And in this movie, he is in terrible brown face with a bad mustache. I'm not completely sure what his ethnicity is, but it ain't what it is in this movie. But he was in an early 2000s TV show called The Invisible Man, playing a secret government agent, and I got to be a guest star on one episode. So I got to hang with that crew, and he's very intimidating, but very funny as a man. He's very like, you see him from afar and you're intimidated, and then he cracks a joke. He's got a very like stoic gaze. That was a fun show. And the director of that episode, Josh Butler, we became friends, and he's still a friend to this day. And he's directed hundreds of episodes of episodic TV. So go check out Paul Ben Victor's IMDb. He's a good actor and a good dude.
And that's your Jeff Garvin actor moment. It has been so long since we had a Jeff Garvin actor moment.
Believe me, when I saw him and I was like, wait, that's Paul Ben Victor.
He said someone will come to revenge for him. Something like a sick horse who comes to sit with him. He talk crazy, no entiendo un carajo.
It's not what he said, you ignorant wretch. Spanish is worse than your English.
Tests. You called this out as part of the Crossing the Threshold, but I think the appearance of Doc Holliday as Johnny Tyler is about to shoot Wyatt in the back after he's been kicked out of the Oriental. Doc Holliday interrupts him.
Why, Johnny Tyler! Madcap!
Doc?
Where you going with that shotgun?
I didn't know you was back in town.
And together, Wyatt and Doc Holliday intimidate Johnny Tyler into leaving the shotgun and walking away.
It's a great scene.
I don't think this is so much a test. Well, yes, it is. It is a test. But it is also the introduction of an ally, a reunion of Doc Holliday, the ally, with the Earps.
Yeah.
It is also a test because Johnny Tyler knows Wyatt Earp's reputation, knows him by name. He didn't recognize him, but he knows him by name.
Right.
And that is what causes Johnny Tyler to back down.
Love it.
Continuing the meeting of allies, again, you mentioned this in Crossing the Threshold. No, you said this was a mentor moment. Wyatt is introducing Doc Holliday to Sheriff Behan. This is immediately following the exit of Johnny Tyler. They're discussing how Tombstone is growing. Behan says, be as big as San Francisco in a few years and just as sophisticated. That's when the gunfight at the saloon across the street erupts.
Yes.
Very cosmopolitan.
Turkey Creek Jack Johnson and Texas Jack Vermillion come out. This is meeting allies because both of those men end up joining Wyatt Earp's posse of vengeance at the end of the film.
I'll buy that.
Continuing more meeting of allies, and this is also, I consider, test 2, contrasting that violence immediately following A stagecoach arrives and deposits the town's new theater troupe, including Mr. Fabian, played by Billy Zane, and Josephine Marcus, played by Dana Delaney. So Wyatt and Josephine immediately make eye contact. Trouble is afoot. As a test of Wyatt's fidelity, this is the beginning of a failure.
Yeah.
Test 3 is in the Birdcage Theater. You mentioned this also in Act 1. And I agree with you. It is a call to adventure on the romantic front, but I considered it a failed test because Wyatt is completely unable to mask his interest in Josephine Marcus in the presence of his wife. This is another failed test on the marital front. Later that night, at the Oriental, you talked about Josephine Marcus entering the bar, dancing her way up to Wyatt and him turning his back on her. Because I saw the relationship of Josephine Marcus really not quite an adventure, and I think I may be wrong about that. You're convincing me that it really does belong as a trackable adventure throughout the story. So
trackable side quest?
Yeah, I think so. So when he turns his back on her, yes, that is a refusal of the call, but I also saw it as a past test.
I'll buy that because he doesn't give in to her wiles.
Right. Then, one of the best tests, I think, is while dealing faro, Wyatt, Morgan, and Doc are confronted by Curly Bill Brocious, Ike Clanton, and Ringo.
Yes.
Listen now, Mr. Kansas law dog. Law don't go around here. Savvy?
I'm retired.
Good. That's real good.
And then Ringo and Doc verbally spar. They threaten each other in Latin.
Yeah, they have a Latin rap battle.
Yeah. Did you look up the translations of what they had said to each other?
No.
Okay, I did. Ringo, he says, Juventus stultorum magister, and he taps his pistol. And what this means is youth is the teacher of fools. He's basically telling Doc Holliday that he's a whippersnapper, and he doesn't know what he's getting into by making an enemy out of Johnny Ringo. Doc Holliday says, in pace requiescat, which means rest in peace. Basically, Doc Holliday is telling Ringo, it's your funeral if you want to get tangled with me. Then Ringo does his pistol dance.
Yes.
Much to the delight of everybody in the saloon.
And props to Michael Biehn.
And Doc mocks Ringo by twirling his whiskey cup in the same manner. This is a past test for Doc Holliday, not at all being intimidated by Johnny Ringo.
That test worked on two levels too, because I think it's depending on how you view Wyatt's journey, I think it's a fail because he really fails to stand up to them. He just pretty much backs off. And if his adventure is to have a peaceful life in Tombstone, then Doc's behavior is a fail for Wyatt because Doc is blatantly provoking the big bad.
Yes, yeah.
Look, darling. Johnny Ringo. The deadliest pistolier since Wild Bill, they say. What do you think, darling? Should I hate him?
Yeah, I agree. This is Wyatt refusing to acknowledge the threat that these men pose to the town.
Yeah.
Next test, you had this as a crossing the romantic threshold, the encounter with Wyatt and Josephine Marcus out while they're horse riding.
In fairness, I have the date afterwards as a test.
When they lay down the blanket and they're sitting there talking about what they want out of life.
I put that as the test, yeah.
Yes, yeah, me too. When Wyatt says, I want to settle down and have a family, and she challenges that and says, it doesn't suit you. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
Again, this is another character telling Wyatt, this is not the life that's meant for you.
Right.
And then she says her idea of heaven is room service. She just wants to travel the world, but she needs somebody to share it with. This is when Behan is mentioned. We've seen Josephine with Behan a couple of times, but it wasn't clear yet that they were a romantic couple. But Wyatt says, why are you even with him? And she says he's fine for now. So we know that Josephine is not committed to Behan. She travels from town to town. She's probably got a guy in every saloon.
That brought a question to my mind, and you're usually really good at this stuff, so I've been waiting to ask you this. How much time has passed since he arrived? Because it seems like it's a very compressed time period. So when he said, why are you even with him? I thought, wait, they're together? Like we've seen them at the bar once and then in one other place together. But like, when did that happen? How long has it been? How long has it been? How long have they been there? Has it been a month? What?
Yeah, I don't know. I imagine it has to have been several months, because in the next scene, Wyatt returns home to find Allie chugging laudanum lying in bed, and he asks her, we've already made a ton of money in this town. Why don't we pull up stakes, travel the world, live on room service for the rest of our lives? How'd that be? And she laughs him off and is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
For him to claim we've already made a ton of money in this town, they've obviously been there a while, even though...
But doesn't he ask her either in this scene or in a later scene, is that the same bottle of laudanum that Virgil's wife gave you? And that was... He does ask that in one of these scenes, and that leads me to believe like, oh, well...
He asks twice. Outside the Birdcage Theater after the show, Wyatt asks again, Maddie, because she takes out the laudanum, and she says, is that the bottle Lou gave you? You need to go easy on that stuff. And she confirms, yes, it is. In this scene, he comes home and sees her chugging laudanum and says, is that the bottle Lou gave you? No, that's a new bottle, isn't it? So I don't know how much laudanum she takes when she does it, but I suspect she'll go, because that was a tiny little bottle. It looked like it was like a 3 or 4 ounce bottle. So I feel like she goes through it pretty quickly. And it's probably not even the first new bottle that she's bought after she consumed the one that Louisa gave her.
Right, and I guess that was a clue in the opposite direction, that it hasn't been that long. Otherwise, he would have known she would have gone through more. That's just a time clue. I was trying to triangulate the timing of that, but whatever.
This is a challenge to Josephine's question to Wyatt, are you happy? Immediately following this unofficial date with Josephine, he returns home to find his wife, his drug addict wife, in bed and argumentative with him when he is trying to express concern, like, you see a doctor or go easy on that stuff, and she just blows him off and says, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
This is a challenge to the are you happy question. No, he's not. He's trying, and that's when he hops on the bed and says, why don't we pull up stakes and see the world? And she laughs at him.
Yeah.
Final test is the murder of Fred White. A drunk Billy Clanton is harassing Doc at the piano, and across the street at an opium den, Curly Pill gets high, stumbles out into the street, goes on a gun rampage, and there we see the cowardice of Sheriff Behan, who charges into the Oriental where Marshal White and the mayor are, and says, somebody needs to do something about this. And the mayor says, well, you're the sheriff. And Behan says, no, this is not a county matter. This is a town matter, and sends the marshal out to go handle the problem. And Marshal White tries to arrest Curly Bill, and this I still do not know if it was intentional. It looks intentional to me when he hands the gun and he like flips it up and the gun goes off and it shoots Fred White in the chest.
Yeah.
But Curly Bill's performance after that, he looks like he's surprised.
My take on it was he was high and he's shooting at everything and he's not connected to reality.
Right.
And that he did shoot him and then immediately realized what happened.
Yes.
And regretted it. Because we've seen Curly Bill a couple times be shocked by something Ringo did and then play it off as humorous, like, wow, Ringo, you're the crazy one.
Right, like when he shoots the Padre.
Yeah, so he does have some kind of sense of, I only go so far, Ringo goes farther. And I think this is a great moment where he goes too far and realizes it, but too late.
This is your crossing of the threshold for Wyatt's adventure.
Right.
He comes out of the Oriental, apprehends Curly Bill, and then faces off against half a dozen cowboys who come out and demand that Wyatt lets Curly Bill go.
I swear to God. Law Dog, you don't step aside, we'll tear you apart.
Right. You die first, get it? Your friends might get me in a rush, but not before I make your head into a canoe. You understand me?
With the help of Doc Holliday, who has some of the best lines in this movie, in this scene, when Billy says, "Oh, you're just a drunk piano player. He's probably seeing double."
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
So great. Val Kilmer deserved an Oscar for this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things about this movie that don't deserve Oscars, but Val Kilmer does. Well, that brings us to Approach to the Inmost Cave. The hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. I began Approach with the confrontation with Curly Bill. Because...
Huh?
What?
You said that was your crossing of the threshold.
Yeah. I said that was his crossing of the threshold in that adventure. But I also mentioned that I had put it in the approach in terms of the flow of the movie. It's my contention that the reason this happens so late, the reason he crosses the threshold so late is because it's a reluctant hero story.
Right.
That's how I pin this. But
got it. Okay.
The confrontation with Curly Bill is what sets off the war, the thing that leads inexorably to my ordeal. We'll see if we're in sync on that. The next plot point of approach. Virgil has stepped up and replaced Fred White as the town marshal. The cowboys come to get Ike out of the drunk tank, and one of the cowboys bumps into Wyatt as Wyatt's going in and gets in his face about it. And Wyatt says, "Hey, cool down, I'm sorry." And the cowboy says, "You can take sorry and shove it. I'll fight you right now." And Wyatt does his signature move, his Expelliarmus, and pistol whips the guy, knocking him down, just knocks him down. This incenses Ike.
You're gonna bleed. You got a fight coming today.
Meanwhile, Doc's tuberculosis is getting worse. The doc tells Doc he's lost 60% of his lung tissue. The reason I put this in approach is because this is a signal that Doc's going downhill. This is leading to his demise. And then the last section, which is really the edge of the dangerous place, is the cowboys ride through town, clearly displaying that they are well armed.
Stay calm, use your head, it'll be all right. Just the same, though. Guess maybe you better swear me in.
And that's where I ended approach to the inmost cave.
Yes, you skipped the scene where Virgil nails up the no guns in town policy.
Oh, right. Drawing a line in the sand.
And then Wyatt shows up and says, "I thought we weren't getting involved."
Yeah.
There's a line that Wyatt delivers to Morgan when he's trying to convince them to not go down this path. And he says,
"All those years I worked those cow towns, I was only ever mixed up in one shooting, just one. But a man lost his life and I took it. You don't know how that feels, Morgan. Believe me, boy, you don't ever want to know. Not ever."
Ordeal. The hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear, sometimes actually appearing to die. Now sworn in as a deputy town marshal, Wyatt and his two brothers and Doc Holliday, who notably has not been sworn in as a deputy of the town marshal's office, stroll down the street to the OK Corral, where 6 cowboys are waiting and telling everybody that they are there to clear out the Earps and Doc Holliday. They are armed, which is in violation of this new no guns in town policy that Virgil Earp has enacted. That's why this is happening. That's why I wanted to mention it in the previous
that was
segment.
That I definitely should have put that in there. It's important.
The ordeal is the gunfight at the OK Corral.
You're damn right.
I don't know how much of this we need to talk about. I mean, everybody knows the gunfight at the OK Corral. This film obviously puts its own spin on it.
Yeah.
There's some humor involved between Doc and Billy.
Some humor.
Thomas Hayden Church's character.
Doc's wink is the thing that sets it off.
That's why it's funny.
It is funny, but it's also like, oh, come on, Doc. You knew that was going to start shit. Oh.
I got you now, you son of a bitch.
You're a daisy if you do.
The Earps and Doc Holliday win the fight. First of all, one of the McLowrys ran, the one played by John Corbett.
Yeah.
Ike Clanton somehow manages to not get shot.
He's the luckiest sumbitch in this whole movie.
The rest of the cowboys are killed, but not before Virgil takes a shot in the leg and Morgan gets shot in the arm. And that's the ordeal.
That brings us to reward, the ultimate boon. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest There's one point you left out of the shootout, but I could see it being part of reward, which is Behan tries to arrest. He tries to arrest the Earp brothers, and
that's I saw that as reward. Yes.
Wyatt says, "I don't think I'll let you arrest us today, Behan." So he's claiming dominance over the mayor. Like, I'm not your tool anymore.
The county sheriff.
Sorry, the county sheriff. So the reward is fairly thin here. They've disarmed the cowboys, winning a very short-lived peace. Josephine comes to check on Wyatt, giving him that winning smile, my hero. Wyatt tells the mayor, "I guess we did our good deed for the day, Mayor." That's pretty much it as far as the reward that I saw. Did you see anything that I'm leaving out?
I only saw one extra moment, and it could share a seat with Vengeful Forces, but the Earps are sitting on a porch. I don't know if it's one of their cottages or what, but the funeral procession of the cowboys goes right past this porch that Morgan and Wyatt are sitting on, drinking coffee or tea or something, I don't know, as the sun goes down.
Yeah.
And this funeral procession of cowboys is heading to Boot Hill Cemetery to bury their comrades. And Morgan tells Wyatt,
"You're right. It's nothing like I thought. I almost wish it."
I know, Morgan. I know. Me too.
While it's not a reward as in, yay, I won the treasure for Morgan, it is a moment of growth and affirmation for Morgan. He has experienced a tragic event, and this is a moment of growth for him. He now has that same experience that Wyatt has of knowing how awful it feels to kill a man, even if you are doing it to uphold justice, to uphold the law.
That's a really good point. Vogler does call out, I want to say, new perceptions.
Correct.
And that certainly
yes
fits right into that slot.
Exactly.
So bravo. That's a really good moment.
And that is where I ended Act 2, because I think there's a real clear visual clue that Act 3 is coming.
If we don't have a drink, I don't think I could bear it.
Well done.
Let's head over to the Vogler Saloon. Welcome to the Vogler Saloon, where Dan and I are having very cosmopolitan drinks here in the New West. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
What have you selected for your themed beverage for the Tombstone episode?
I found a cocktail that is relatively new to the world. This was created by San Francisco bartender John Santer in 2004.
Wow.
It is called Revolver.
Ooh.
The cocktail is 2 ounces of bourbon, half an ounce of coffee liqueur. I used Kahlua.
Oh.
2 dashes of orange bitters. Now here's where I want to give a shout out to Phil, who is a bartender at Foreman's. He is also the owner of his own bitters company called Better Bitters.
Oh, it's a great name.
They actually use these bitters at Foreman's, but you can also go to bettercocktailbitters.com and order directly from their website. So I have the Valencia Orange Better Bitters used in this. So I want to thank Phil for providing this for me. This was a gift from him. So I am making use of that in this cocktail. I'm going to hold it up for the camera so you can see it, Jeffy Pants. It looks very much like an old-fashioned.
Ooh.
2 ounces of bourbon, half an ounce of Kahlua, a couple dashes of orange bitters. There's also a orange peel that is expressed onto the top there. Ooh, it smells nice. I don't know if it's the orange bitters, but I can actually smell the orange, which I feel like when I have an old-fashioned, which also uses orange oil, you squirt the orange oil from the peel, but this actually has orange bitters. Usually use Angostura bitters for an old-fashioned. But this, I actually smell the orange. It's nice. It's a subtle scent, though. It's not like overpowering. Oh, wow. That tastes like I'm in a saloon. The coffee liqueur that you add to this adds I don't know how to express it, like a down-home feeling.
Huh.
To this beverage. It's just a real earthy experience.
Sawdust on the floor, spittoons by the bar.
Maybe.
The smell of gun smoke.
What an interesting flavor.
And the sweetness of the coffee liqueur is supposed to essentially sub for the simple syrup?
I think so.
Interesting.
Wow. That is good. I better slow down. I've already consumed half of it. That is good stuff. But you take all the ingredients into a mixing glass with ice, mix it up, strain it into a rocks glass with a ball, and then squirt your orange peel on it, and off you go. That's awesome. It's called a revolver. What do you have?
I, too, found a cocktail. I discovered a website that I feel like everyone probably already knows about. It's called Mr. Boston.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a well-known cocktail publication.
It's a website I feel like everyone already knows about, as is evidenced by Dan's response. But in case you don't know about it, it's MrBostonDrinks.com, and it's based on a bartender's guide established in 1935. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
I've been drinking since I was 21,
okay.
So I found on that website a cocktail called Tombstone.
Oh, neat.
And it is a rye cocktail, so I found a bottle. This is this distillery's second appearance on the podcast from Park City, Utah, High West.
Yeah.
But instead of Yippee-Ki-Yay, I got double rye. It's a blend of straight and rye whiskeys.
I've got 2 ryes, one for each of you.
I almost got Firestone Walker Double Barrel Ale in honor of Doc and the Shotgun, but I got this instead.
Yes.
So this is 2 ounces of straight rye whiskey. This is not straight white. This is straight and rye. A ½ ounce of...
Wait, what?
The recipe calls for straight rye whiskey. This is a blend of straight and rye whiskeys. Does that make sense?
No, that is not what that means. When a bottle says straight whiskey, it means it has been aged for a minimum of 2 years. So straight rye whiskey is rye whiskey aged 2 years. Blended straight rye is a blend of 2 different straight rye whiskeys. It's not a blend of a straight whiskey and a rye whiskey.
Oh, no, I see what you're saying. It's multiple straight ryes mixed together, not a mix of... Got it. Okay.
And also, nothing can be added to a straight rye. No coloring, flavor, additional spirits are allowed if it's going to be straight.
Got it. It's 2 ounces of rye, ½ ounce of... They called for Demerara syrup. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Could not find that anywhere, so I just used simple syrup. 2 dashes of Angostura Biddle. 2 dashes of Angostura Biddle.
We're leaving this in.
2 dashes of Angostura bitters. I think I had trouble saying that word in the last episode.
You often say biddles. You really do.
Oh my God.
Multiple episodes you've said biddles.
Jeez. Lemon, aluminum, linoleum, and then a twist of lemon. You shake it with ice, strain it into a cocktail glass. I'm using a rocks glass. I'm learning a lot that I don't have enough glassware, but I don't have room for it, so I don't care. Here we go. It smells refreshing. I smell the lemon. That's pretty much what I smell. I don't smell the whiskey at all, really. Okay, that is way too sweet.
Uh-oh.
I even toned it down to 75%. I did not put a ½ ounce in here. I put 3/4 of ½ an ounce. I'm not intelligent enough to do the math right now. I guess that's 3/8. When I order like an old-fashioned in a bar, I say easy on the sweet, like not too sweet.
Uh-huh.
This is really sweet. But it's got, with the lemon, it almost has a sweet tea kind of a vibe.
Calling back to your Remember the Titans beverage.
Other than being way too sweet, it's quite refreshing.
Okay.
It makes me want to taste this whiskey by itself, which I will probably do later today. I may even add a little whiskey to this to dilute the sweetness, but it's refreshing. It's lemony and sweet, and it's got a nice warm whiskey feeling as it goes down my throat. So I recommend it. I have a feeling this is really smooth because I do not taste a lot of that rye. I always describe it as a bite. I don't know if that's a legit term, but it...
Sure. It's a term that I think people understand. If you ingest something and it bites you, then, that's a... Oh, brother, he is pouring more rye into the glass.
I just gave it another 1/4 ounce of rye. I'm going to let that settle in there.
You put a little bit more in there?
My God. You said I was making fun of your cognitive decline yesterday. Now who's revenging himself?
I'm just glad I'm not alone anymore.
Thank you for listening to the Biddle Journey podcast. All right. Well, if I'm having trouble pronouncing it at the beginning of the beverage, let's see how I do when we get to return with the elixir. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're going to spit our tobacco, drink our drinks, make our way out of the saloon and into Act 3.
Act 3 begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces disturbed when they seized the object of their quest. I don't know why I said it like that. The object of their quest. Time code, 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 55 seconds is a horizon shot of the sun setting, indicating the arrival of Act 3.
Boom.
A drunk, Johnny Ringo, accosts the Earps on the street as they are on patrol.
What do you want, Ringo?
I want your blood. And I want your souls. And I want them both right now.
I don't want any more trouble.
Well, you got trouble! And it starts with you.
This is the introduction to vengeful forces.
Oh, yeah, baby. Ringo says, don't any of you have the guts to play for blood? And this is an important moment because there's a callback to it.
You're right. There is a callback to it.
Yeah, so Ringo says, don't any of you have the guts to play for blood? And Doc Holliday steps up and says,
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Ringo challenges them. He certainly doesn't want Doc to be the one to call him out, but the Cowboys pull him away, and Curly Bill says he's just drunk.
And then it was a dark and stormy night.
Dan, I wrote exactly the same thing. Dark and stormy night, weather signaling vengeance.
Yes, correct.
It's a very Stephen King trope.
Behan tells Josephine that he sees what's going on between her and Wyatt, but that after tonight, only one man will be in charge of Tombstone, and she'll be happy to know him. Wow. Way to put your cards on the table, Behan.
Yeah. Curling that mustache.
The question is, at this point, is he working with the Cowboys to assassinate the Earps, or does he just know of their plans and he's not stepping up to interrupt them? The Earp wives are in the sitting room of one of their cottages. They're sipping tea.
The Earpettes.
They're sipping tea while Allie reads tarot cards with a ominous message. And Josephine arrives and warns them that she thinks something is going to happen tonight. Then there's a knock on the door, and as Allie opens it, someone with a shotgun fires twice into the room, but Josephine manages to tackle Allie to the side so nobody is injured.
Yeah.
Wyatt and Morgan are sitting in an empty Oriental. The weather has kept everybody at home. Virgil stumbles in and collapses on the floor. He has been shot. The doctor who tends to him says that Virgil is going to lose the use of that arm.
It is a bitter pill to swallow.
Wyatt leaves the cottage and encounters Cowboy Sherman McMasters, played by Michael Rooker. We've referenced him before. And McMasters throws his red sash into the dirt at Wyatt's feet, and he says, I heard what they did to your wives. I don't agree with it, and I'm quitting the Cowboys. Then we see that riding with McMasters are Turkey Creek Jack Johnson and Texas Jack Vermillion. And as they leave, they say, we've got your back if you need us for anything.
Yeah.
I also think that this is a late reward because these three guys have pledged themselves to help Wyatt in the coming battle. Cut to Morgan playing pool by himself. Suddenly, well-timed with the thunder, a gunshot rings out and Morgan twitches and falls to the ground. He has been shot in the back. We cut to Wyatt arriving on the scene. Morgan is bleeding out on top of the pool table. The doctor says the bullet is lodged in too deep. I can't get it out. Like, this is a very ineffective doctor. He can't save Virgil's arm. He can't save Morgan. Frontier medicine was not very useful to the Earps.
Unfortunate in a culture that has so much gun violence in it.
Unlike Virgil, Morgan does not survive his attack. Bill Paxton gets to do a nice death scene.
Remember what I said about seeing a light when you're dying?
Yeah.
It ain't true. I can't see a damn thing.
And then the light goes out of his eyes, and Morgan is dead.
Can we just, again, pause for a moment on the brilliance of Bill Paxton? This is a guy who created a movie archetype, the kind of character he plays.
Through his performances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because now Bill Paxton type, I guarantee you, that's like in the descriptions of characters and screenplays, that's one of the best. Again, cheers.
Absolutely.
To Bill
yeah.
Paxton.
And sadly, he is no longer with us. He died at a young age.
Yeah.
It reminded me, this scene, it reminded me of the previous Western we did, 3:10 to Yuma, where Alan Tudyk has
another
his
guy
death
that gets
scene.
all the good death scenes.
Very similar scene. He is shot and bleeds out, and you see again the light just vanish from his eyes. Incredible performance. So when actors who can do that, amazing.
Agreed.
As the storm now arrives over Tombstone, rain begins to pour. Wyatt stumbles into the street. His hands are covered in Morgan's bright red blood. Literally blood on his hands. This is not a subtle symbol. Josephine runs to him, but he screams at her to get away from him. He then turns around. He sees Maddie standing in the rain. She was going to run to him. Wyatt attempts to wipe the blood from his hands, only succeeding in smearing blood on his white shirt. This is a baptism unlike others that we have seen during our 5+ years of doing this. The hero emerges from this baptismal scene changed, but into an angel of vengeance.
Yes. Remember, when they come out of that theater and Morgan talks about God, Wyatt says he doesn't know. And now Morgan has told him there's nothing. I don't see anything. So not only is his brother dead, but he's essentially in oblivion.
And as you pointed out very astutely, Morgan was the spiritual part of Wyatt.
Yep.
That is gone now. Not only is it gone, but Morgan before his death was disillusioned. So the spirituality of Morgan perished before Morgan did.
I think that, more than anything else, is what pushes him over the edge.
Morgan was the innocent one. He killed a man during the gunfight at the OK Corral, but that was his first experience. Morgan was he was the good kid. He was the pretty one.
Yeah.
I almost cut it there.
Oh, really?
Because there's a symbolic resurrection, but I don't think it fits the structure of the hero's journey.
Okay.
The Earps pack up and leave town. On the way out, Wyatt stops his carriage in front of Curly Bill and Ringo, who were sitting on a porch, very much the same way that Morgan and Wyatt were sitting on a porch during the funeral procession after the gunfight at the OK Corral. And Wyatt says, "I want you to know it's over." And off they go. The Earps leave town.
Well, two other lines happen that I think are crucial. Ringo says, "Smells like somebody died." That's a provocation.
Right.
And then, again, you just rolled right past Paul Ben-Victor, like as if he's not even in the movie, when he says, "Adios, cabron."
Adios, cabron.
It's like you don't even see him.
I'll have to rewatch the film. After the Earps are gone, Curly Bill tells Ike, "Take Stillwell and finish it."
Yeah.
This cuts us now to the train station as the Earps are boarding the train. Ike and Stillwell are about to attack. They've got their guns pointed at Maddie, who's sitting by the window, and Stillwell says,
Hey, Maddie, where's Wyatt?
Right behind you, Stillwell.
Bye-bye, Stillwell. I wanted to call this the resurrection because this is now Wyatt resurrected as a vengeful lawman.
I like that.
But I didn't. I revised my analysis because there's so much that happens afterward.
He becomes a vengeful force.
That is correct. That was my realization, is that now Wyatt is the vengeful force. It's not always the enemies that are the vengeful forces. Sometimes the hero becomes a vengeful force.
And this connects to something that you talked about with his baptism in blood.
Yes.
Which is, this is him become death.
Tell all the other curs the law's coming! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear?
We now get a montage of Wyatt and his posse, made up of Doc Holliday, the shapeshifter, Sherman McMasters, Turkey Creek Jack Johnson, and Texas Jack Vermillion, riding across the prairies, through the deserts, assassinating every cowboy they find.
Yes.
The final moment, I think, of this segment is the river battle, where Wyatt and his posse, caught in a crossfire, Wyatt either snaps or experiences a moment of apotheosis. He repeating no. He walks into the middle of the river amid a hail of gunfire.
Mm-hmm.
Every bullet missing him. Curly Bill gets up, confronts him in the middle of the river, empties his revolver at him, and doesn't hit anything. Then when Curly Bill levels his rifle at him, Wyatt screams one more time in what I think is like the cheesiest moment of this entire movie. He goes, "No!" and blasts Curly Bill with the shotgun, and then finishes off the rest of the assailants.
I'm glad you brought up the no moment, because there are several parts of this movie that drift deeply into the realm of melodrama, and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
That moment doesn't work. I also didn't think the scene where he stumbles into the rain covered in blood works, with the two women just happen to come up to it. Just doesn't work. And it takes you out of the movie because it's just it's kind of those embarrassing things. This is kind of embarrassing. You're like, oh, it doesn't, no.
Yeah. There's a moment in this sequence during the montage where Wyatt Earp, standing in front of the camera, firing his revolvers at the camera.
Yeah.
The first time I saw it, I thought, much like you're talking about now, it was melodramatic and it didn't work. Now, having seen the old silent film, The Great Train Robbery, I recognize that this is an homage to that. And if you haven't seen it, they play those scenes at the beginning during the silent film intro to the film. A lot of what you see in that, what's supposed to be like newsreel footage, I guess, with Robert Mitchum narrating over it, are actually scenes from The Great Train Robbery. And then as we shift into the actual film, the last image is the guy from The Great Train Robbery shooting his pistols at the camera. And this is actually also referenced in Goodfellas. There's a scene of Joe Pesci doing the same thing, which is also a reference to The Great Train Robbery.
Yeah.
It's all connected. The end of the sequence for me is after this gun battle at the river, the posse is resting, and Doc starts coughing, bleeding from the mouth violently, and Creek Johnson says,
"Doc, short of being dead, what the hell are you doing this for anyway?"
Wyatt Earp is my friend.
Hell, I got lots of friends.
I don't.
Heartbreaking.
Get you a friend like Doc Holliday.
Val Kilmer, man, in this movie. I extended it a little bit farther. Behan encounters Josephine in her carriage holding Billy Zane's character's dead body, and she says,
"You tried to bring something fine into your ugly world and you shot him for it."
And that's when Jason Priestley's character breaks with the Cowboys and says, "I can't do this anymore, I'm out." So it's clear that Behan is with the Cowboys, and I kept that because I thought that Billy Zane's death at the hands of the Cowboys is another vengeful force because they are destroying...
You're right. And I guess the revelation of Behan definitively allying with the Cowboys is a vengeful force. He's the county sheriff, and he has deputized the Cowboys. They're all wearing badges now.
Right.
Absolutely vengeful force. Sure.
That leads to the next thing, which is Doc falls off his horse. This is his health catching up with him. He's been extending himself too far. So they stop at Henry Hooker's ranch. Dan, I did not know that Henry Hooker was played by Charlton Heston. I've seen this movie a dozen times. Until I looked up on IMDb, I did not know that was Charlton Heston.
You don't know what he looks like? What?
I looked at him and I was like, oh, I guess that is Charlton Heston. But it's completely, I didn't recognize him.
You've seen this movie a dozen times?
I'm sure I have.
Wow.
I owned this film on VHS, Dan. Still didn't realize it was Charlton Heston. That's the kind of person I am in terms of the attention I pay, apparently. Paul Ben Victor, recognized him. Charlton Heston?
Sure.
No,
yeah.
I recognize Paul Ben Victor in brown face with a fake mustache. Charlton Heston, nope. Charlton Heston playing a cowboy on a horse, which is like the most Charlton Heston thing you can do.
Yep, unless he's making out with a monkey. There's no other more iconic Charlton Heston role.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, Jeff. You do you.
So they put Doc to bed. And I included this also in Road Back, though I can see it as part of Resurrection. So Josephine and her entourage show up to water their horses. And Wyatt and Josephine, they have a conversation where they kind of make up.
I'm sorry about your friend. And I'm sorry that I
forgave you the moment you said it.
But she rides away in the carriage. So it's yet another step of him losing her in a definitive way. She is leaving. And then a cowboy, one of the not just any cowboy, one of the cowboys.
Cowboy with a capital C.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And shows up with McMasters' dead body. That's another vengeful force because now they've killed McMasters. And he says, Ringo wants to meet you behind the lunchroom at 7 p.m. And then in what I called the last bit of the road back, Wyatt goes to see Doc one more time before he rides out. And he tells Doc,
I spent my whole life not knowing what I wanted out of life. Just chasing my tail. Now for the first time I know exactly what I want. And who. And that's the damnable misery of it.
And then Wyatt looks at Doc and says, I can't beat him, can I? Referring to Ringo. And Doc says, no. You see Wyatt resolve himself to die anyway because he knows he has to face Ringo. And Doc looks at Wyatt's badge and says, what is it like to wear one of those? And Wyatt gives him his Marshal star, symbolically saying, what I'm about to do is not about the law. It's about vengeance. It's about completing something for my family. And of course, it pays off later. And then Wyatt rides out to face Ringo.
A man like Ringo got a great empty hole right through the middle of him. He can never kill enough or steal enough or inflict enough pain to ever fill it.
What does he need?
Revenge.
For what?
Being born.
So that brings us to Resurrection. The hero faces death one more time in an ordeal, battle, or showdown. I mean, showdown. The dangers on the broadest scale of the story. Cut to the woods. There's Johnny Ringo pacing. He's got his guns ready. And a figure comes out of the shadows to face Ringo.
I didn't think you had it in you.
But it's not Wyatt.
I'm your huckleberry.
It's Doc Holliday.
Why, Johnny Ringo. You look like somebody just walked over your grave.
Ringo says, my fight's not with you. But Doc, now resurrected from his deathbed, evokes their earlier blood feud.
We started a game we never got to finish. Play for blood, remember?
I was just fooling about.
I wasn't.
Doc is using this honor challenge, which in the Old West was a legitimate reason to duel. It's kind of like Hamilton and Burr. It's a legitimate reason. They have a beef. They're going to have a blood feud. It was considered an honorable thing to do. And when Ringo finally agrees to this, all right, Lunger, let's go, you can see in his eyes that he knows he's outmatched. So now we have a classic Western drawdown. We've got close-ups on the eyes. We've got close-ups on the hands on the guns. They really honored the Western tradition of a drawdown.
Say when.
He starts to draw. and Doc shoots him right in the forehead. And Michael Biehn has this great stumbling death scene. It's so great. A couple times during the movie, when Doc has faced a potential opponent who threatens his life, he says, "You're a daisy if you do." And here he says,
"You're no daisy at all."
And then, of course, Ringo falls dead.
Poor soul. He was just too high-strung.
Ringo has been defeated. Doc has proved his loyalty in essentially sacrificing himself, which we'll find out sort of later that he's going to die anyway, but this is his last act with his last gasp of energy. And then the rest of the resurrection is they ride down the rest of the cowboys and they shoot them all, except Ike. He gets away.
The last charge of Wyatt Earp and his immortals.
That's right. So that's what I saw as end of Resurrection.
Final segment of the hero's journey is the freedom to live, or return with the elixir. The hero, having won a precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. Having defeated the outlaw gang known as the Cowboys, Wyatt now visits Doc Holliday at the Glenwood Sanatorium, where a priest is giving last rites. Wyatt sits down to continue their card game that apparently they've been playing throughout Wyatt's visits. And Doc, the consummate gambler, says, "I don't want to play anymore." Doc has accepted his fate, and he tells a story about how he was in love once with his first cousin, who joined a convent over the affair, and she was all he ever wanted. And then he asks Wyatt what he wanted. Wyatt says, just to live a normal life. And Doc Holliday tells him there's no normal life. There's just life. Now go live it. And Wyatt expresses that he doesn't know how to go on. He's basically lost all of his allies. He's here now saying goodbye to his last ally. And Doc Holliday tells him,
"Say goodbye to me. Go grab that spirited actress and make her your own. Take that beauty and run. Don't look back. Live every second. Live right up the hill. Live Wyatt. Live for me."
This is the freedom to live. Doc Holliday is begging Wyatt to live.
I can't with this scene. I tear up. I'm tearing up now because Val Kilmer's performance is so powerful. It doesn't matter the rest of the stuff that doesn't work. Doc absolutely stabs me in the heart in this scene. I love him so much. Val Kilmer proved himself as a brilliant actor in this scene. If in no other performance, this is the thing.
Doc then begs Wyatt to leave. He says, "If you've ever had any feelings for me at all, leave now." And Wyatt acquiesces. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to leave his friend to die alone. He wants to be there for him in the last moment, but he agrees.
Yeah.
He thanks Doc for always being there, and he walks out. And Doc then looks at, I forgot to mention, when Wyatt arrives, he hands Doc a little book.
Yeah.
But Doc doesn't even look at it.
Yeah.
Now he does. And he sees that the title is My Friend Doc Holliday by Wyatt Earp. It's like a little story that Wyatt has written. And as he holds it to his chest, he breathes his last breath. Absolutely alone.
Oh, I can't
Not
do
even
it.
the nurses are there.
Oh, stop it. You're killing me.
Now we get Wyatt meeting up with Josephine at a theater in Denver, Colorado after a performance of the HMS Pinafore.
I have nothing left. Nothing to give you. I have no pride. No dignity. No money. I don't even know how we'll make a living, but... I promise I'll love you the rest of your life.
And Josephine says, "Don't worry, my family's rich." So off they go. Now we get the conclusion. Robert Mitchum narrates the conclusion of the film, giving us the John Hughes style, here's what happened to everybody. Ike Clanton was shot 2 years later during a robbery attempt. Matty Earp died of a drug overdose shortly after leaving Tombstone. Virgil and Allie had moved to California, where Virgil, despite the loss of his arm, had become a town sheriff. And Wyatt and Josephine stayed together for 47 years until his death in Los Angeles in 1929.
Almost 100 years ago.
It is almost 100 years ago. And this film came out in 93, so this is this film's 30th anniversary.
Or as you like to say, in the late 1900s.
The late 1900s, yeah.
Disgusting. I love this movie. It's got a lot of problems. Val Kilmer makes it worth watching every time. I love it.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of The Hero's Journey, Sheriff Jeffy Pants. Justice has been served. Our consciences are now clear. Listeners and patrons, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share us with your friends and family.
Like and subscribe, rate and review on your favorite podcast app if it supports that function. If you'd like to support us in continuing to create this podcast, take a minute on your phone and go to patreon.com/Heroes Journey Podcast and check out all the different benefits you can get by becoming a patron.
Thank you to our patrons who make this show possible, including our demigod tier patrons, John Peterson Jr., Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin, Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, Salathiel Jones, Jasmine and Pete Hudson, Mike and Susie Zarzana, Randy Sparks, Justin Purvis, and our newest demigod patron, the first of 3 new patrons this month, Mark Brightman. We also want to welcome Brian Malone and Savvy M. Thank you to all patrons and especially to these 3 newest. This is really exciting. Thank you, everybody.
That's a really awesome list. We're so grateful to you. Every time we read that list, we go, wow, these people are just amazing, making this possible. Also, a special thanks to Taylor Jordan, who composed all the Hero's Journey music. And thank you to Jason Dorff for our original episode artwork. Check out their portfolios on our About page at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
Tombstone is copyright 1993, Synergy Productions Incorporated. Thanks again for listening. Until next time,
journey on.
I've not yet begun to defile myself.